first speaker, Lobo, talked about what he learned from experience, what he learned from his life. And he talked about it as his beliefs. A belief, for example, that you can't choose to be a dancer. Life chooses you. He could have said, this is what I know. So I'm going to use the word knowledge to the kind of knowledge that he has from life. But I'm going to talk about a different kind of knowledge, the knowledge that you learn in schools, colleges, textbooks. And I'm going to raise the question, how trustable is that knowledge? My focus is going to be on academic knowledge, by which I mean what you get from textbooks, teachers, research articles, and so on. So let me begin with the question, what is knowledge? And I'm pretty sure that you must be telling yourself that knowledge is a set of statements that we believe to be true, or a set of statements that we judge to be true. Let me give you some examples. Suppose I ask you what is the tilt of the Earth. How many people know the number? Can you raise your hands? Okay, 1 or 2 people. You learned this in your primary school, by the way, and then you forgot about it. Okay, let me remind you what you learned. 23.5 degrees. Sound familiar? You did this for your exams, and you've forgotten. What are the elements that air is composed of? I'm pretty sure that you know that it contains oxygen, nitrogen, and so on. And so these are the things that you know. But now let me ask you, suppose Zeno believes that the Earth revolves around the sun. You will be able to say, Zeno knows that the Earth revolves around the sun. Let me take a different statement. This time, Zeno believes, for whatever reason, maybe he was in the 14th century, or Zeno is a 10-year-old child, that the sun revolves around the Earth. Would you now say Zeno knows that the sun revolves around the Earth? Ask yourself. You'll feel uncomfortable. Or maybe when you were about 7 years old, you believed that the sun revolves around the Earth. Will you say, I knew when I was 7 years old that the sun revolves around the Earth? No, that doesn't sound right. How come? This is because when you want to say no, whatever you say after that, you should believe it. Because you don't believe that the statement, the sun goes around the Earth, is true, you cannot say even about your own knowledge when you're 7 years old. So no has this peculiar property. It's a very egotistic property. What I believe is true, everything else is wrong. That's why we began with the statement that knowledge is a set of statements that we believe to be true. But that answer raises a number of questions. One of them is this. Okay, let me illustrate with this example. Air is an element versus air is a mixture, not an element. Okay? Now, this is what our ancient authorities used to believe, both in India and in Greece. But the second statement is what the textbook authorities tell you. So if your belief is made on the basis of what you are told both. Both are authorities, ancient authorities and textbook authorities. How do you choose between these two? On what basis do you say such and such statement is true and such statement is not true? Why do you choose to trust the modern authorities as opposed to the ancient authorities? The first question is, which of these statements should you accept as true? And if you accept the second and reject the first, what's the basis for that decision? Well, the first criterion of truth would be we accept as true what the authorities tell us. That may work, and it is generally the case that this works in most cases. It is reasonable. So suppose I were to ask you, how old are you? Don't tell me right now, but think about it. And you might give me some year and month and date, and you might think of your date of birth. But how do you know this is true? You don't remember the process of being born. You know this because somebody told you, your parents told you, or you have it in your birth certificate. So it's a reasonable one, but there is a problem. Even though it is reasonable, we need another criterion, namely, we accept as true what our experience tells us. And this is what our first speaker was talking about, learning from experience. And why do we need that? Because, as I said, sometimes authorities are in conflict. Two authorities tell you two different things what you believe, and maybe you have to look for another criterion, and I'm suggesting this one. And again, like the first one, this is also quite reasonable. Suppose I ask you, what's the color of my hair? And you have a multiple choice question: black, gray, red, green, brown. Okay, it's easy, you will say gray. But how did you come to know that my hair is gray? You'll say, it is obvious, we can see you. So your visual experience tells you that my hair is gray, so that is another source of knowledge. So there are two sources of knowledge. One is what other people tell you, and the second is what you experience visually through your hearing, taste, and so on. Your experience tells you. Again, as I said, this is quite reasonable, but this too has problems. For instance, if you're looking at a mirror, what do you see? There is a person in the mirror who looks exactly like you. So in other words, your visual experience tells you that there is a clone inside the mirror. You don't believe that, do you? Obviously not. You say that's an illusion. So you distrust your experience. If you look at the night sky, what's your visual experience? Your visual experience is that the moon is much bigger than the stars. Stars are very small. But do you say that this statement is true, that the moon is bigger than the stars? No. Okay? Most importantly, as you're sitting here, do you experience the earth moving? Nobody does. So your experience tells you that the earth is not moving, but you choose to believe that the earth is revolving around the sun and rotating on a tilted axis. Why did you choose to reject your experience? So both these sources of knowledge are problematic in the sense they're not completely trustable, partially trustable. So you need something else. And that something else is reason or rationality. The word rational means in accordance with reason, and rationality or rational knowledge is knowledge that is in accordance with reason. So let me give you an example. Suppose I tell you that I have a younger brother, and my younger brother is 74 years old, and I ask you, is that true? You don't know. Maybe I'm telling you a lie. Maybe I don't even have a brother. Now I tell you something more, that I am 72. Is that true that I'm 72? Again, you'll say, we don't know. But now I ask you, what about the combination? What about the statement that I am 72 years old and my brother is 74 years old? And you would say, no, that cannot be true. Even though you don't know my age, you don't know my brother's age, that combination you will immediately reject. And why is that? That is where reason comes in. Your reasoning tells you that if I am 72 years old, it cannot be the case that my younger brother is 74 years old. And if it is true that my younger brother is 74 years old, it cannot be true that I am 72 years old. This is the kind of reasoning that is used in mathematics. The entire math is coming from that kind of reasoning, not observation, not what somebody else says. So let me state the essence of that kind of reasoning, what you have in mathematical proofs. as these two pillars of rationality. One of them says, if we accept a set of premises, initial starting points, then we should also accept their logical consequences. In mathematics, they're called theorems. There is another part, which is a combination of statements which are logically contradictory must not be accepted, must be rejected as false. These are the central pillars of rationality, that is the foundation for academic knowledge. And I want to add one more source of knowledge, namely intuition or gut feeling or insight. What that means is that we have some beliefs, some concepts, which are not based on anything. Let me ask you this question. Are you dreaming now, or are you awake? I'm pretty sure each of you would say that you are awake, you're not dreaming. How do you know? It's a feeling. It's a feeling that you're awake. I'm pretty sure that you have had the feeling when you were asleep that you were not dreaming, you were awake. So there is no answer to the question, what is the basis for this feeling that you're awake? You may be completely wrong. But this is important, okay? This is important in many areas of life, that kind of feeling. And it was this feeling that the first speaker was talking about. So all these are legitimate means to knowledge. So let me make it brief. To go back, when these sources of knowledge are in conflict, what do you do? Okay, I gave you several examples. For example, one authority saying that air is an element, another authority saying that air is a mixture, and one authority saying that the sun revolves around the earth, and another authority saying that the earth revolves around the sun. Your experience being in conflict with your rational knowledge. So what I'm going to do is to suggest the following. The next criterion, C6, says that if there is a conflict, you prioritize your reasoning. If your reasoning is in conflict with the other sources of knowledge, then you accept reasoning. This is somewhat radical. This is not what the mystics would agree on. The mystics would say, prioritize direct apprehension of truth. But that is mystical knowledge, not academic knowledge. I am suggesting the criterion for academic knowledge. So the question would be, are there cases when textbooks are in conflict with reasoning? Yes, there are several. Let me give you two examples. So here are three sentences that you find in textbooks. One, microorganisms are life forms that are invisible to the naked eye. Fungi are microorganisms. Mushrooms are fungi. Conclusion, you cannot see mushrooms. This is exactly, I've copied this from textbooks, okay? And I can give you lots and lots of examples of such textbook statements. Let me give you one that is slightly complicated. And that is these two statements. Angles are classified in textbooks as acute angles, right angles, obtuse angles, straight angles, and reflex angles. So this is an acute angle, this is a right angle, this is a straight angle, obtuse, sorry, this is reflex. Now, a straight angle is one that is two right angles. So an angle on a straight line is a straight angle. Now, consider this. Any straight line AB, take any random point C, ACB is a right angle. How many points are there in a straight line, finite line segment? Infinitely many. How many straight angles are there in a straight line? Infinitely many. What is the sum of angles on a straight line? Infinite. A triangle has three straight lines. What's the sum of angles in a triangle? Infinite. But your textbook tells you two right angles. You have to reject one of them. You can't accept both, that the sum of angles in a triangle is infinite and the sum of angles in a triangle is two right angles. You can't do both. You are forced to reject at least one part of the textbook. Now, most textbooks are full of such statements. So the only solution that you have is, given that we have to reject one of them, you have to learn to distrust textbooks. You have to learn to ask, why should I believe what the textbook says? Doubt and question textbooks. I'm not suggesting that you distrust everything, you reject everything in a textbook. I'm simply saying, Don't blindly accept everything that your textbook says. Don't blindly accept what your teachers say. Don't blindly accept what I'm saying. Okay? Thank you for listening.